Great. Well, good. Welcome everyone who is here for our January 28th Building Level Advisory Committee meeting for the Presumpscot School Project. It's been a little while since we met. It was, as we were recalling from in our last meeting with the Reiki BLAC, and we didn't meet in December. So the last time we all got together was in November. And so we've been busy during that period of time. The project kind of was on hold for a little bit and then is moving again, which is exciting. And we'll share what we've been up to. So our agenda tonight is to give you an update on what were the final outcomes of the Green New Deal as it related to the Green Building Code for the City of Portland, and kind of intertwined in that is the LEED requirements. And so we'll kind of give you bring you up to speed on that and where those things settled out. And then we'll talk about the bidding strategy of a staggered bid schedule for the projects. And so we'll explain how that's going to take place moving forward. An update on the owner's rep and clerk of the works, which Steve Stilfen will give us an update on that. And it'll almost be like starting our meeting all over again, because that'll be item 2 after item 3. So seeing that the order of the agenda is a little off, but and then we'll move to some a preview of some of the interior work on the building that we've been starting to now dig into the details of the interior. We've spent some time on the exterior, and you've seen shots of the entrance there, and now we're starting to dig into the interior design, and we'll share an image and some thoughts on that, and then where we are in the process of pre-qualifying contractors to build the additions and renovations. So that started in December in terms of our advertising for contractors who might have an interest in this. And we'll bring you up to speed on that. And then finally, next steps, and that's pretty much kind of where our next meetings are, and when we will meet again with this group. So with that, I will just quickly go over some of the outcomes of the back and forth that we had with several advisors, and in discerning what the impact of the referendum question from October was. And that outcome was that it was determined that because we had submitted our planning board application for the Presumpscot School project in advance of when the requirements of the Green New Deal took effect, which was in early, I want to say in early December, we were sort of grandfathered under the requirements of the Portland City Green Building Code at the time that we submitted those applications. And so that is prior to these new requirements. And just a quick reminder, those new requirements included a higher energy standard. It had a better roofs component to it. And so those were some of the significant components. They also had fair wage requirements, OSHA training, and a few other items as well. But the big items that were going to impact the design would have been the update on the LEED, the version that we're required to design to, or that the city is requiring to design to, as well as the enhanced energy and the better roofs program, which says you need to set aside a certain percentage of your roof to be solar ready. So with that, we were kind of grandfathered, so we kind of keeping right along the same track that we originally envisioned for this project, and it meant no changes in our scope as we envisioned, and just to keep on moving with the design. So and that's the same with Longfellow, and Reiki falls into a slightly different category because its construction costs are actually below the assessed value of the building, where at Presumpscot the current assessed value is right around $7.5 million, and the construction costs are north of that to the tune of almost 10 million. And so that's the difference with this. We do have to comply with the Green Building Code of the City of Portland, but we will do it with the old requirements, not the ones that were updated through the question C of the referendum. And what we will be moving forward with, though, and this is something that was talked about quite a bit as we prepared for the LISAP school project to go forward, and that is the fair wage requirements. And the fair wage requirements are, we'll get into a little bit in detail on what those are, but those will be still in effect on this project, even though we're not going to be required to do them as part of the Green New Deal items. And so I'll pause for a second here, and Lisa is going to give us kind of an update on where we are with pursuing LEED Silver for the Presumpscot School project.
Well, good evening, everyone. Great to see you. I will continue the pause just to see if there's any questions before I jump in. Not seeing any. Okay, so yes, we haven't met since November. We've been working closely with Thornton Tomasetti to make sure that we're on track to meet our LEED Silver requirement. And I know that there's a lot of information on this slide, and you're not necessarily meant to have to read all of it, but essentially just want to provide an update on the points, what we're tracking right now. And just a reminder for anyone who isn't familiar with LEED, it's a rating system broken into different categories. And the idea is that collectively all these categories really assist in approaching a holistic, or having a holistic approach towards sustainability. And there's a bunch of prerequisites that we have to do no matter what. And then there's a bunch of credits that we get points for. And so anything in the left-hand column, we call that the yes column. And those are the ones that, yes, we're tracking and we're in compliance and the scope is in alignment. The ones that are in the middle two categories, those are both maybe categories or maybe columns. The one on the left is a strong maybe and the one on the right is a weaker maybe. And then the one all the way to the right is the no column. Essentially, either the location of the building or different scope items just don't align with compliance. Therefore, we know those are not within our reach. The good news is right now we're tracking right at 50. So we are at the minimum threshold for silver. We do like to target around 53 to 55 just to have that comfort level when we get ready to submit. And so we continue to look at those credits in the strong maybe column and start to dial in which ones of those can move over into the yes column. So we're continuing to work with Thornton Tomasetti to just really monitor and track that as we go along. But in general, we're looking good for meeting that threshold and being within compliance. And the other aspect of this is Thornton Tomasetti and Harriman will reach out to the principals of each school and set up a time to meet and talk about the different sustainable initiatives that are going into the design, and with the intent of trying to see if there are ways that we can do educational sessions or provide different information for integration into any of the curriculum or education of the building occupants. So Anj, look for an invite from me in a week or so, and we'll get that set up, and then we can figure out how to get that out to a greater audience. So that's exciting to always see it fold back in as a teaching tool, especially in school environments.
Very good. Any questions on LEED? So as we also alluded to, there's a fair wage contracting component to the projects that we're incorporating. And what that does is it provides a minimum pay that the general contractors will pay their, or all contractors will pay their workers. And we use the Maine Department of Labor's labor wage standards for that. And we'll show you the example in a minute here. But the way what that really does is it ensures that because this is a publicly bid and competitively bid project, there's always pressure on keeping costs low. So the contractor with the lowest cost would stand to have the best opportunity to get the project. But what the fair wage requirement does is it says that you need to maintain a minimum payment or pay wage for workers. And so that's something that certainly has gotten a lot of press in terms of livable wages and ensuring that we're really providing a equitable pay for the amount of work that's being done. And so that's why we use the Maine Department of Labor. In the not too recent past, because construction was such a hot market and there was so much work going on, we had less worry about this because of the supply and demand of workers and labor. There was contractors were having to pay oftentimes above what the state of Maine labor rates were. So, but it's an important requirement. We put it into the contract documents and we spell out to the contractor that here's the wage determination sheet. It has to be posted on the job site. And we also require that the contractor submit their payment information, their wages with each of their pay applications every month. And we review that for compliance. And if there's something that appears to be irregular or a lack of compliance, then we act on it at that time. So that's kind of the reporting and accountability component of it as part of the inclusion into the contract documents. And so this is what the labor looks like. And so it'll tell what the occupation title is. It's broken down by particular occupation, what the minimum wage benefit is. And then there are always benefits, the fringe benefits that are built on top of the hourly wage. And then it gives you the total hourly wage that's required. So that's in Cumberland County for building construction other than 1 and 2 family homes. And that was last year or 2 years ago now, with the license project. Any questions on fair wages? Okay, moving along here. So the other item that we had, I think, talked a little bit about was the idea of a staggered bid schedule. And so the bids for the 3 schools are going to, they're going to happen sequentially about a month apart. And the first one's scheduled for the end of February, and that is Longfellow School Project, and we'll explain a little bit of the logic behind that in a minute here. But and then the next one happens, Reiki happens at the end of March, and then Presumpscot happens at the end of April. And so the important thing to consider is that we're looking at tracking the budgets for these independently. So it's not as if somehow we'll use all the funds on the first 2, and by the time we get to Presumpscot, well, we ran out of money. That's not the way it works. We sort of hold the budgets that we've been appropriating for each of the projects independently. So that's something we've talked about before, and we'll look at that as we receive bids. And if we need to do value engineering for the various schools, we'll do them independently in looking at their respective budgets. So that's how we envision that process moving forward. And so the bid period takes about 4 weeks. So when we produce documents and we allow contractors to bid on them, we give them about 4 weeks to produce all of their pricing, and then we ask all the contractors on a certain day to turn in their pricing, and then they turn it in, we open it up, and we're either pleasantly surprised or we understand we have a little bit more work to do. So that's kind of, but on this schedule, you can also see the intent is that they all start construction relatively at the same time. That coincides with when the buildings are finished use for the regular school year, and there's more flexibility about starting construction without them being occupied. So that is at the end of the school year in the late spring, early summer. And so the whole aspect around the staggered bidding and why we're doing it, the biggest reason is to get as many contractors interested in the project as we can. And so when we were talking to contractors, most of them said, if you put them all together as a single project, we just don't have enough resources to go after a project with 3 separate management and supervision personnel assigned to that. So they'd have to have a separate superintendent for each school. And that would really tie a lot of contractors that said, we don't have 3 project managers and 3 superintendents to go after this project. And so we would lose the number of contractors that wouldn't bid it in that case. And what we essentially want is we want to increase the pool of contractors. What that will do is the more contractors we have, qualified contractors we have to bid on the project, then what that usually translates into is greater competition and lower prices, which means more value for our. There are 2 large construction projects just in the school market undergoing bidding at the same time, and that one of them is in South Portland, so it's not that far away. It's about a $60 million project, so the replacement for Memorial Middle School, and it's in some ways a little more attractive because it's a single site. It's not an occupied renovation. They'll build a new one and then they'll remove portions of the old one, and so it's a more attractive to larger contractors. The other one is a new school in Auburn, which is about 100 million. So the issue with those 2 large projects is that that'll take away some of the larger contractors that could potentially do all 3 projects at once. And so with that market consideration, we also move towards the idea that we want to break it up into smaller independent projects that smaller contractors can bid on independent and not have to take on all 3. We have a similar scenario where this was successful, not too far away in Yarmouth, where it was four schools, and we broke them up into 3 different building projects in 3 bids. And so we had a common pool of contractors that were allowed to bid on any of the 3 schools or 3 school projects. So the first one, 5 of the contractors from the bid pool bid on it. It was about a $5 million project, so it was a relatively small one, and it came in at just under the construction budget. So it came in at about $360,000 below the budget. So that the reason that we probably only got 5 bids for that one is that there were probably some contractors that wanted to go after the larger projects, and 5 million was a little bit small for them. So it may have actually fit nicely for some of the smaller contractors. The second one, we had 7 bids, and that was for about a $10 million construction value, and that came in just under budget as well. And so that by the time we got to the 3rd project, the construction value of that 3rd project was almost $30 million, and that again shows the fact that we only had 3 bids means that it's really, we do get fewer contractors that in the state of Maine that are undertaking projects at that scale. A lot of them have will do projects in the 1 million to 15 million range, but once it starts getting up to 30 million, there's fewer contractors that will bid on that. And that one actually came in over budget, so we had some value engineering that we had to do on that project. But it also goes to show, oftentimes with fewer contractors, we get less competition for the project itself too, and that translates typically to higher construction costs. So the sequencing, the last slide I think we have on the whole staggered bid is the sequencing. How did we come up with the sequencing that we did? Presumpscot has the shortest schedule, so that's the good news for you folks is that you're going to be living around the construction less time than your friends over at Reiki or Longfellow. So that's the good news. And I know all you that work there will really appreciate that. And if you aren't sure how much you'll appreciate it, call Lenore and find out how construction, she lived through it and she was a trooper, but it does impact your operations around the school. So the idea though that you have the shortest duration gives us a little more flexibility in terms of when the project starts. And so we because the work that we are doing at Presumpscot mostly falls outside of the building itself. The big addition that we're putting on to replace the portables on the back, that is really separate from the interior of the building and can really happen very much while you're occupying your school. The front is a little more entangled into it, but again, the idea is that it's you have less of a construction schedule and a little more flexibility, and that's why Presumpscot was the last one to go. And then Reiki has about a 30-month construction and a lot of interior work and very little exterior work. So we put that one second, and then Longfellow has a little more exterior work and that long construction schedule as well. So that one is going first. So that's how we kind of arrived at the various sequencing. Any questions on the staggered bid before we move to just a quick update on clerk of the works and owner's rep? All right. You're all getting, oh, Lauren might have a question.
Sorry, you kind of talked about it already, but just where our project is being bid last, do you see that it still is going to fall into the building timeline? I know that the hope was to start doing some of the building this summer. Is that still, I mean, I don't know how long it takes from awarding a bid until when the construction actually starts.
Yeah, it's a good question, Laura. We still think that, yes, it will. So, but it will be a little bit later than, I think if we go back to I'll go back to that schedule for a second. And so the bid award is June 17th. And so by the time we get the contracts all done and the contract mobilized, it'll be somewhere in July for their breaking ground. That still gives them plenty of time to work. The big thing is getting foundations in and getting a lot of that concrete work before cold weather. And so that's really what the sequence is. And we think there's still enough schedule in order to get that done. But that does, it certainly pushes things out a little further. The delay I think we had in kind of pausing with the Green New Deal gave us a little bit of a late start on it, later than we wanted. But we think, yeah, they'll definitely be starting in the summer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. And this is where we pick on Mr. Stilfen to give everyone an update on the position of the owner's representative. It's a position that is hired on to assist the owner in managing these construction projects, the three that will be coming, as well as finishing the last one that's underway now.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everybody. So yeah, so as we see, we will have 3 schools in construction this summer. And part of the process of project management in the bigger sense of the term is we have an owner's rep and a clerk of the works. Clerk of the works will be assigned by hours per week per school project. And that's in our contract with Harriman and that jurisdiction of that contract. CHA was selected from a request for qualification selection process. They will be our owner's rep as a third-party entity for checks and balances to assist us with project management of these 3 concurrent schools as we move through them, from checking the fair pay to being a traffic cop, so to speak, for information that flows from the architect, Mark Lisa, through the clerk of the works to us as the owners, with that third-party view to have our position from the owner always in the conversation. So project management is going to be critical for success, to be on time and on budget. And we're building this team now. I'm in negotiation with CHA to make sure that we are efficient and not overlapping in any areas that the clerk may be charged to doing, as opposed to where we want oversight and assistance from the owner's rep. So it's an exciting time for the Portland Public Schools. And Laura, I appreciate your question. Yeah, we'll be digging holes in the summer for Presumpscot. It looks good for the contractors that have pre-qualified, and Mark and Lisa will speak to that here. So that's my report for this evening.
Thank you, Steve. All right. Any questions on that before we move along? Seeing none. And if there's something comes up, you can flag it and we'll go back. With this, with the next step, Lisa, I think, will share with us a little bit about some of the work we've been doing on the interior of the building.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so the interior of Presumpscot. So we always like to connect back with the design statement that we worked with the community to create. And both Mark and I and the design team always reflect back on that as we start to develop both the exterior and interior design of the schools. So just to recap, Presumpscot's design statement, as you can see, is written on the wall, literally, is a welcoming, diverse family, creating spaces for learners to grow, collaborate, and explore. And so what we've started to do here in the entryway is really start to create that welcoming space, that welcoming environment. So doing that through adding many ways to bring natural light into the entry, bringing the warmth of wood on the walls and the steps, and starting to introduce color into different components. Creating spaces for learners to grow, collaborate, and explore. So we really start to look at different spaces throughout the school. So even spaces just like the lobby here with the bench seating starts to become a place where people can pull off, have one-on-one learning sessions, collaboration sessions, or just learning from one another and their peers, to other spaces integrated throughout the design of the building, and really looking to celebrate the diversity of the school through this idea of diversity of color as well as diversity of materials, and having the color also in unique places throughout the school starts to help with wayfinding as well. Having modifications to a school and being able to have color to help the students identify their home within the school helps to have layers of this idea of creating spaces for the learners as well as creating that welcoming environment, not only just at the entry, but within their space within the school as well. So this space that we look at right now, really, again, the natural light and simple, just kind of recessing different materials and adding splashes of color. And we'll start to integrate sort of this palette and these different design moves in other spaces throughout the school. So we'll keep providing updates as those progress, but I'll stop here and see if folks have any questions about what they're seeing.
Looks like Jen has a question.
Yeah, so Presumpscot's theme is the blue wave, I believe, and Jen and Annie, if you could help out with that. But if you're going to create a space that encompasses the school and the theme that they work on, is there a way to start, using the language that we have for expeditionary learning, using the language of our motto or our blue wave or the color blue to kind of bring that home? I'm seeing something that kind of throws me off a little bit for what our school is.
Absolutely. We're open to exploring that idea for sure. I think we'd love to hear more about it and understand it a little bit more in depth so we can figure out ways to weave that into the overall design.
Is there some material that you have that has an explanation of it and some of the philosophy behind it? If that can be forwarded to us, that'd be great. We'll start to look at it to incorporate that. Have
you looked at the school website, the Presumpscot website, and kind of explored? I don't know what's on there right now. Angie, if you could help me out there. But you could also go to EL Schools, and EL Schools is the representative kind of organization that the school works under. And you can kind of get an overview of expeditionary learning on I think it's EL. It's changed its name a little bit, EL Education, but
I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Yeah, I was going to hop in. Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
I'd be happy to talk to you about it later. Yeah, and sort of brainstorm that, Jen. Have Jen also be a part of it. That would be awesome.
Great. All right. We're very good. We're excited to move this forward. We're pretty excited about the idea that it'll create and the evolution of this will create a really child-centric, wonderful, vibrant learning environment, and ways in which we can enrich it with themes of and supporting expeditionary learning. That would be great. We'll definitely look to see how we can integrate the two. So a quick update on the qualification, the general contractor qualification. So we'll move from the design side of it back to the contracting side of it a little bit here. And we sent out in December an advertisement to solicit interest from contractors to submit their qualifications so that we could determine those that are qualified to undertake the construction. And then those were due in early or mid-January, January 14th, which is about 2 weeks ago today. And so then we reviewed the list. This is the list of contractors that submitted qualifications. Most of them have done school, in fact, I think all of them have done to some degree or other school construction projects. And we've worked with every single one of them on the list. And so we went through very carefully the information that they provided suggesting they were qualified. We summarized that and we forwarded on our recommendations to the school district in the formal process to pre-qualify contractors. A reminder that we did the pre-qualification for really, there's two primary reasons. One was to ensure that we were getting qualified contractors to do the work. And so by putting the process of pre-qualifying into play, it would dissuade some contractors that may not be qualified to undertake this type of work. And so it was really kind of a, okay, well, those who really probably shouldn't be going after and submitting bids for this work, well, this process may prevent or may make them think twice about submitting a bid. The second thing that it does is it sort of generates interest, and so we have a sense of who out there is interested in potentially submitting a bid for the work. And so, and it engages them before the work, before our contract documents are complete. So those are really two parts to that, the reason for advertising when we did. And so right now, our initial review is that we'll likely have 10 contractors as our pre-qualified contractors. And so that's good news. And from that pool of pre-qualified contractors, anyone on this list is as long as they have the resources, they are able to bid on any of the school projects. And so that's one pool that can then bid on the 3 different projects. Questions on that? All right. Well, that brings us to next steps. And so right now, we have the bid documents being completed at the end of April and then opening at the end of May. And we'll all be enjoying much different day lengths and temperatures by that time. So that's exciting and a lot to look forward to. Again, pinch ourselves that we're actually getting to this point in what has been an incredible journey in the building for our future school projects. We do have to go through planning board approval, and so we're now starting to work with the planning department to get on the agenda for the planning board, and so that's coming up. We'll notify abutters, and there'll be a public hearing. There'll be a workshop with the planning board, and then there'll be a public hearing on it to approve the project itself from the planning board. Then we will submit our application to the permitting department for the building permit. We will open the contract. We will open the bids in late May, and we'll look to see if we're in budget. And then if we have to do any adjustments, we'll do that through a process called value engineering. And typically that's reducing scope and receiving lower costs because we remove scope from the contract. We'll ask the school board for approval once we get it all in line, and then we'll award the project, and we'll all enjoy the groundbreaking, getting ready to do that. And that likely, as we said, it will be in July. So that's kind of the next steps in the formal process. But we again have several touch points with this committee as we prepare for that. And our next meeting is 4 weeks from now, and the fourth Thursday of February 25th. And you folks will be the first of that. So it'll be at 5:30 for our next meeting in our rotation. And with that, are there any questions? We appreciate everyone's attention, and we really appreciate the feedback on the input on the design. Seeing none, there's, I don't know if we want to do the approval of minutes, or we wait until we have a chair at our next February meeting. Superintendent Botana, how would you like us to handle that?
I don't have, there's no rush to get the minutes approved. Not having a chair here, I would rather we just wait until we have a chair.
Very good. All right. Any last comments before we let everyone enjoy the rest of their Thursday evening?
Can I ask one question before we go? Just it's back to sort of Laura's question around groundbreaking. So when is it going to be too late to break ground and action, right? So when do we know what's not happening for next year if things get slowed down?
Yeah, I think the answer to that, Principal Taylor, is that we won't know until we kind of get to that point. But there isn't a time that's too late. What happens is we'll have to look at the impact of the construction schedule itself. And so what the contractors will be very careful of is if it costs them more to heat portions of their work to keep it warm, because some work can only happen in warm conditions. So sometimes they have to tent an area or keep a space warm, and that costs them more money. And so we'll have to just be very careful about that as we get close to the award of the project itself. But right now, we don't anticipate that that's going to be an issue, because they'll build that in to their schedule right now, knowing the calendar that we have. And so there will be breaking ground this year, and sort of barring any unlikely event of a significant delay in getting the bid awarded.
And so things that could significantly delay the award would be things like the bids coming in high and requiring a significant amount of value engineering. So this group coming back together to make decisions about what we wouldn't do, the board having to weigh in on, upping the cost, the budget for Presumpscot, from the reserves and things along those lines. So those are the kinds of things that would delay breaking ground on the front end in terms of awarding the bid. What about on the back end, Mark, once the contract is in place? I'm thinking, like in Lyseth, there was a significant delay in being able to move the portables, because of permitting issues, because of the platforms that were needed, because of the electrical that needed to be brought and things along those lines. So what are other circumstances that would potentially slow us down? And then to Angie's point, at which point does it become you don't actually really get started? And so when you think about this as a 30-month project, what we're basically saying is that for 2 years, the school would be under construction, but very close to the start of the 3rd year, the school would be ready for, it would be done, completely done. Everything would be packed up, people would be off the grounds, everything would look pretty and all of that stuff. Similar to what happened with Rowe Elementary. At what point does that become that you're actually going to be like,
right? Yeah, the evaluation is really an economic one, because if it becomes more costly to have to in delaying the construction that we are moving into winter conditions, if it's more costly to put that work under winter conditions than it would be to delay and start it the following season, that would be the determination where you'd say, okay, it's more cost effective if we wait a season to actually get underway. And so it's a cost benefit analysis to understand really if it will delay us starting the construction itself. Most of the time, it's still more cost effective to start in sort of as soon as you can, because the costs escalate, construction materials escalate. There are other aspects that the contractor has buyouts of their product. They can't buy those out. So normally it continues on, but everything you said with respect to what can delay us is indeed the case, that if there takes a period of time for value engineering, that will delay things. And in this case, we have a little bit more flexibility, as we've kind of been mentioning. The Presumpscot, because the addition is the most of the addition in the back is really independent of what happens in the school, that we're somewhat freed from the school calendar entanglement like we are with Reiki and Longfellow, because we don't have to use the cycle of moving students in this semesters, or the thinking about the school year and how it's broken up. So that gives us more flexibility, gives the contractor more flexibility in terms of when they schedule their work. And because of that, we also have the shorter schedule here. So I just want to be clear, our anticipated construction schedule for Presumpscot is not the 30 months like we have for the other two. It's actually, I think we've got right now about 18 months for Presumpscot. So the intent was to use the time of this summer and next summer, and the construction would occur in that window, that 16-month window, and that gives us a little more flexibility. If that window slides, again, what they're doing doesn't necessarily impact directly as much the schedule and the school operations.
Except for the portables that need to be addressed so that classes can be held in those. So
correct. Yep.
It is interrupted because of the portables, and making sure that happens in a timely manner.
Yeah, that will happen. So that happens on the front end, right? So the portables get moved before the construction really gets going in earnest. And so as long as we have the foundations designed, and we've learned a little bit from the process and working with the city from the license project. So the foundation system for the portables and the relocation is all now built into the contracts in a way that will streamline that process, unlike what happened at LISA. All great questions. Okay. Well, here we'll look forward to meeting everyone again at the end of February, and appreciate again your time tonight and your great questions and your interest in all the aspects that will affect this project. So thanks again, and have a great Thursday night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.